Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to another heartfelt tale. Before we dive into today's story, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you for your love, your support, and for being part of this journey with me. Grab a cup of tea, get comfy, and take a deep breath, because the story I'm about to share is one of love, patience, and devotion. A love that waits a lifetime. A love that conquers every heartbreak, every whisper, and every doubt. So relax, let your heart open, and let's get lost together in this emotional, romantic tale. The house smelled of sorrow. 17-year-old Jones Edwards stood by the window, his fists buried deep in the pockets of his trousers, staring blankly at the garden where his mother once loved to plant tulips. The flowers had long withered, just as she had. He could still hear her laughter, soft and musical, carried in the summer breeze. But now the house was silent, suffocated by grief. His father, Edward Sr., sat in the living room day after day with a glass of whiskey in his hand, a hollow shell of the man who once filled their home with warmth. Jones had never felt so alone. Neighbors whispered in pity when they saw him in town, offering sympathetic glances but no words. His friends at school gave him space, not knowing how to handle the heaviness that seemed to hang over him. But there was one person, one woman whose presence had always brought him light. Jennifer. Jennifer was his childhood anchor. She lived down the road in the little cream-colored house with the blue shutters. And from the time Jones was a boy of 9, he had admired her. She was 27 now, a woman who carried herself with grace and quiet strength. When his mother was sick, Jennifer often stopped by with casseroles, her soft voice filling their kitchen with comfort. She was his mother's friend, his family's confidant, but to Jones, she was something more. Everything more. It was a love unreturned, a love misunderstood, a love that people might call foolish because of the 10 years between them. But to him, it was pure. It was destiny. The night before he was sent away, he walked the dirt road to her house. The summer air clung heavy against his skin, his heart pounding as if it knew the weight of what he was about to say. He found her on the porch, rocking gently in her chair, the glow of a lantern softening her features. She looked up when she saw him, her lips curving into that familiar smile that made his chest ache. "Jones," she said warmly, "you should be in bed. It's late." "I needed to see you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. She tilted her head, studying him. "What's wrong?" "Everything," he thought. "My mother is gone. My father is drowning in his sorrow. And tomorrow I leave the only home I've ever known." But all he could manage to whisper was, "I don't want to leave." Jennifer rose from her chair and came to stand in front of him. She smelled faintly of lavender soap, and the nearness of her made his knees weak. "Your father thinks it's best," she said gently. "Canada will give you a fresh start with your aunt and uncle. They'll take good care of you." "I don't want them to take care of me. I want you." The words spilled out before he could stop them. Her eyes widened, and then a soft laugh escaped her lips. "Oh, Jones," she said, brushing a hand against his cheek as if he was still a boy. "You'll break hearts one day, but I'm not yours to love." "I'm not a boy," he insisted, his throat tight with desperation. "I may be young, but I know what I feel. I've always known. I love you, Jennifer. And one day I'll come back and I'll make you my wife." She froze, her hand slipping away from his face. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she shook her head, smiling as if to soften the blow. "You're sweet, but you don't understand the world yet. You'll go to Canada, and you'll meet girls your age, girls who will love you back." "It's not a crush," he said firmly, his voice shaking. "It's a promise." Her eyes glistened in the lantern light, but she turned away, unwilling to meet his gaze again. "Go home, Jones. Get some sleep." He stood there for a moment longer, memorizing her, willing her to believe him, but she only gave him a gentle push toward the road. And so he left, his heart heavy but resolute. The next morning, as the train pulled away from the station, Jones pressed his forehead against the glass. His father didn't come to see him off. Only his aunt and uncle stood there waiting to escort him into his new life. He closed his eyes and whispered a vow into the rattling hum of the train tracks. "I'll come back for you, Jennifer, no matter how long it takes." 3 years passed. Jones was 20 when he heard the news. He had just returned from classes at the university in Toronto when his aunt, with pity in her eyes, handed him a letter from home. Jennifer was getting married. The world tilted beneath him. He booked a ticket on the next flight to the States, his heart hammering with a desperate hope that perhaps it wasn't too late. Perhaps if he stood before her, she would see that he was no longer the boy she had dismissed, but a man ready to love her. But when he arrived, it was too late. The church bells had already rung from across the street. He watched her step out of the chapel, radiant and white, her hand tucked into that of another man. She laughed. Oh, how she laughed, and the sound tore him apart. She never even looked his way. That night he sat on the hood of his rented car outside the little cream-colored house with the blue shutters, and staring at the lights inside, imagining her moving about as someone's wife. He clenched his fists, willing himself not to cry. But the tears came anyway, hot and unrelenting. He couldn't stay, not when every corner of town whispered her name, not when the sight of her with another man felt like a dagger to his chest. So he returned to Canada. But this time, he wasn't the same. Something in him hardened, not against Jennifer, never against Jennifer, but against the idea that life would hand him happiness easily. If he wanted her, if he wanted to be worthy of the vow he made, he would have to build himself into someone undeniable, someone she couldn't laugh away. And so he worked tirelessly. He studied with a ferocity that impressed his professors. He took business risks that shocked his uncle, but paid off in ways no one predicted. He learned to navigate the world of finance, investments, and international trade. By the time he was 24, he was already wealthy. By 27, he was a multi-millionaire. His name respected in circles far beyond Toronto. Yet through all the success, all the late nights and the victories, one truth remained unchanged. He still loved Jennifer. He never stopped. It was another 8 years later, when he was 28, that a call came from his hometown. His father was gravely ill. Jones felt a rush of emotions he hadn't expected. Grief for a man who had never been able to fully love him. Guilt for the years of silence, but also a flicker of something else.
Hope, because going home meant seeing her again. As he packed his bags and boarded the flight back to the United States, one thought pulsed through his mind, steady and unwavering. This time, I won't be the boy she dismisses. This time, she'll see me for the man I've become. And in the distance, the city lights of home beckoned, carrying with them the ghost of tulips, the sound of her laughter, and the unshakable vow of a boy who had never stopped loving a woman. The city had changed, yet it felt strangely the same. Jones Edward stepped out of the sleek black car that had brought him from the airport, his tall frame commanding attention. The boy who had left with grief on his shoulders was gone. In his place stood a man, polished, confident, sophisticated, carrying himself with an ease that came from success and experience. His dark suit fit perfectly, his watch gleamed under the afternoon sun, and his eyes, though sharper now, still carried the echo of something tender, something untouched. Whispers followed him as he walked through the familiar streets. People peeked from storefronts, curious eyes tracing the return of the boy they had once pitied, only now he was no longer a boy. He was the prodigal son come home, and he was not empty-handed. His fortune, though unknown in detail, had already made its way into town gossip. But none of that mattered to Jones. He had returned for two reasons: his father, who was sick, and Jennifer. The thought of her tugged at his chest. What would she look like now? How would she carry herself? Would she still laugh in that same unrestrained way that used to undo him? He didn't know, but the thought of seeing her again after all these years made his pulse quicken like a boy's. Edward Sr. had arranged a party, a grand, extravagant affair at the estate, to announce his son's return and to show off the man Jones had become. The invitations went out across the city, bringing in politicians, businessmen, old family friends, and every member of the community who wanted to be associated with power and money. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers, music floating through the air as elegantly dressed men and women mingled. Jones stood at the center of it all, shaking hands, offering polite smiles, but his mind was elsewhere. His father, pale and weak from illness, leaned heavily on his cane as he introduced Jones to their guests. "This is my son," Edward said proudly, his voice fluttering, but strong enough to carry. "A man who has made his mark in Canada and beyond. He is the future of this family." Beside Edward stood Donald Creek, the mayor of the city, broad-shouldered and stern-faced. His daughter, Clara Creek, hovered at his side, a young woman of 22 with honey-blonde curls, striking green eyes, and a gown that shimmered like starlight. She smiled at Jones with obvious intent, her gaze lingering too long, her laughter too quick at his every polite remark. Edward cleared his throat. "Jones, I'd like you to spend some time with Clara. The Creeks are important to us, and Donald has been very good to our family." Jones didn't need the reminder. He already knew his father's vices, gambling debts whispered in dark corners of the town. He knew his father's promise that Jones would marry Clara to erase what was owed. But Jones only gave Clara a courteous nod and stepped away, his eyes scanning the room, searching. And then he saw her. Jennifer. She stood near the edge of the crowd, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her dress simple but flattering, soft blue that highlighted the warmth of her skin. She wasn't adorned in jewels like the others, but she didn't need them. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her smile faint, her eyes tired yet radiant in a way that struck Jones harder than he'd expected. Beside her were two children, a boy of 7 and a girl of 5. They clung to her dress, peeking shyly at the crowd, their presence both grounding and heartbreaking. It took Jones a moment to process what he was seeing. Jennifer. With children. His chest tightened. His father, noticing where his son's gaze had fallen, muttered, "She was abandoned, you know. Her husband left her after 8 years, walked out on her and those kids. Pitiful, really. She's nothing but—" "Don't—" Jones cut him off sharply, his voice low but firm. "Not another word." For the first time in years, Edward fell silent under his son's stare. Jones moved through the crowd like a man possessed, his heart pounding with each step, until he was standing just in front of her. Jennifer. Her head snapped up, her lips parting in shock. For a heartbeat, she simply stared. Then she laughed softly, shaking her head. "Jones Edward, if it isn't the boy who swore he'd marry me." The children looked between them curiously. "I'm not a boy anymore," Jones said, his voice lower, steadier, filled with something undeniable. Her smile faltered. She looked at him properly then, as if trying to reconcile the memory of the lanky teenager with the man standing before her. "You've changed," she admitted. "Not in the way that matter." She laughed again, but there was nervousness in it. "This time, you always were dramatic." He wanted to say more, to tell her everything he'd carried all these years. But Clara Creek chose that moment to interrupt, She slid in beside him, her hand brushing his arm possessively. "Joan's father wants to introduce you to some of the councilmen." Jennifer's gaze flickered between them, and she straightened, her expression shuddering. "Of course. It was good to see you, Jones." She turned, gathering her children, and walked away before he could stop her. The rest of the evening blurred. Jones endured introductions, shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, but his mind was only on Jennifer. Her laugh when she teased him, the shadows under her eyes, the way her children clung to her, protective even in their innocence. When the party ended and the last of the guests departed, Edward cornered his son. "You need to be smart about this," he said, voice gravelly. "Donald Creek holds the key to our future. That woman, Jennifer, is nothing but trouble. She's older than you, cast aside, burdened with children. The town would laugh if you chased her." Jones met his father's gaze coolly. "Let them laugh." Edward's face reddened. "I didn't raise you to throw away opportunity for sentiment." "You didn't raise me at all," Jones said, his voice like steel, "and you don't get to decide who I love." He left his father sputtering in anger, his footsteps echoing through the empty hall. The next morning, Jones found himself outside Jennifer's small house. The cream-colored walls had faded with time, and the shutters, once bright blue, now showed signs of wear. It wasn't the home he remembered, yet standing there he felt like that boy again, nervous, breathless, desperate to be seen. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face. "Jones?" "I had to see you," he said simply. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The children were at the table eating breakfast. They looked up at him, curious. "Come in," she said softly. The house smelled of coffee and something sweet in the oven. It was small, modest, but filled with warmth. Jones sat across from her at the table, his eyes never leaving her face. "You shouldn't be here." "Why not?" "Because you're your father's son, and because—" She trailed off, sighing heavily. "Jones, I have children now. My life isn't mine alone anymore. I don't have the luxury of indulging anyone's attention." "It's not indulgence," he said, leaning forward. "It's love." Her breath caught. For a moment her eyes softened, but then she shook her head. "You don't know what you're saying." "I've always known," he said quietly, "since I was 17. The silence stretched between them, heavy, charged. Finally she whispered, "You should leave." But even as she said it, she couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye. That night, Jones lay awake in his old bedroom at the estate, staring at the ceiling. He had come home a man with wealth, power, and influence. The community might expect him to marry the mayor's daughter. His father might demand it. Society might whisper behind closed doors. But none of that mattered to Jones. He had built his fortune not to impress Clara Creek. He hadn't endured years of distance and longing to settle for anyone else. He had come back for Jennifer, and this time, no rejection, no fear, no obstacle would turn him away.
The weeks after the party were a storm of whispers. Everywhere Jones went, people's eyes followed him, some filled with admiration for his wealth and success, others with envy or curiosity. But the whispers weren't just about his return. They were about Jennifer, about how he had looked at her that night, about how he had walked away from Clara Creek's side the moment he saw her. The town thrived on gossip, and Jennifer was no stranger to it. She had been the subject of hushed conversation since the day her husband left her. Some called her tragic, others pitied her, and some whispered cruel things. That she wasn't enough to keep a man, that she was now damaged goods. Jones knew every one of those whispers, and each one made him burn with a fury he couldn't voice. But Jennifer, she bore it all with quiet dignity. He saw it in the way she walked, with her chin lifted, her children's hands tucked firmly in her own, as if they were shield enough. And Jones, he was determined to be her shield too. The first time he proved it was when her son fell ill. It was a cold evening, rain battering the streets, when Jones saw Jennifer rushing from the pharmacy, her arms full of medicine.
Her face was pale, her movements frantic. Without thinking, he crossed the street and caught her arm. "What's wrong?" he demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. "It's Michael," she said, her voice breaking. "He has a fever. It won't go down. I can't—" She didn't finish. Her composure cracked, her eyes filling with tears. Jones didn't hesitate. He took the medicine from her trembling hands. "Take me to him," he said. They drove in silence to her little house, the rain streaking down the windshield. Inside, the boy lay curled in bed, his face flushed, his breath shallow. Jennifer knelt beside him, stroking his hair, whispering comfort even as fear etched deep lines into her face. Jones moved quietly, preparing the medicine, fetching water, adjusting the blankets. He stayed through the night, sitting in the chair beside the boy's bed, while Jennifer dozed in exhaustion, her head resting on the edge of the mattress. When morning came, the fever broke. Relief flooded Jennifer's face as she clutched her son close. She looked up at Jones then, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "You didn't have to stay," she whispered. "I'll always stay," he replied. His voice was gentle, but his words were unshakable. And something in her heart shifted that day, though she refused to admit it. The days after Michael's fever and Jones's relentless devotion brought Jennifer to a place she had never thought possible: acceptance. At first, it was small things. She let him help with breakfast, allowed him to walk the children to school, and occasionally accepted the gentle touch of his hand on her shoulder. Every act of care, every soft word whispered in her presence slowly dissolved the walls she had built around her heart. She began to notice how Michael's eyes lit up when Jones entered the room, how Emily ran to him for stories that made her laugh until her sides ached. But Jennifer fought against it. "You're too young for me, Jones," she told him a week later as they walked along the park trail, the children running ahead of them. "You don't understand what you're asking for. I've lived through disappointment. I've lived through abandonment. I can't—" Her voice broke. "I can't risk my children's hearts on a dream that could vanish." He stopped walking, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You think I'd vanish after everything? I crossed oceans for you. I built my life with you in mind. I have waited my whole life just for this chance to stand here and tell you I love you. Not in passing, not as some boyish fantasy, but as a man who knows exactly what he wants." Her eyes welled, but she shook her head. "I'm too old for you, Jones, too scarred. Do you know what it feels like to be left? To be told you're not enough?" "Yes," he said firmly, and she blinked in surprise. "I know what it feels like to love someone who never even saw me, who married another while I watched, who laughed when I said I'd come back for her. You broke my heart once, Jennifer, but still, I'm here. Still, I love you. So don't tell me I don't understand pain. Don't tell me I don't understand love." She turned away, tears spilling freely. "And what about the world, Jones? What will they say? A woman 10 years older with 2 children being courted by a man who could have anyone. They'll tear us apart with their whispers." "Then let them whisper," he said, stepping closer, his voice low, urgent. "Let them choke on their words. I don't care what the world says because I've already made my choice, and it's you." But the world didn't stay silent. One afternoon, as Jennifer left the grocery store, she was met by Clara and her circle of polished friends. Their smiles were sharp, their voices dripping with venom. "So it's true," Clara sneered, folding her arms. "The great Jones Edward, who could have any woman in this city. He's wasting himself on you." Jennifer froze, clutching her daughter's hand tighter. "You really think a man like him will stay?" Another girl chimed in. "Please, you're nothing but his charity case. Do you honestly believe," Clara added, her green eyes flashing, "that he'll want to parade you around when he could have someone young, beautiful, and worthy?" Jennifer's throat tightened. She wanted to walk away, but the words pierced too deep. She kept her head down, guiding her children past them, ignoring the laughter that followed. That night she didn't answer Jones' calls. She avoided him in town. She built walls around her heart so high she thought even he couldn't climb them. But Jones was relentless. He found her one evening on her porch, her arms wrapped around herself as she stared into the dark. He didn't ask permission. He didn't knock. He simply stepped forward, his voice rough with desperation. "I have waited my whole life for a chance to hold you and call you my own," he said, every word trembling with emotion. "You can't take that away from me." She shook her head, her lips trembling. "Jones, please." "No," He cut her off, his voice rising. I love you then, I love you now, I love every wrinkle, every stretch mark you're ashamed of, I love every scar that life has left on you. I love the way you hold your children like they're your whole world, because I want to be part of that world. Please, Jennifer, don't make me lose my mind. Don't make me live without you when I've already lived too long in your shadow. Her breath hitched, tears spilled down her cheeks, falling freely now, and she whispered, Why, Jones? Why me? Because there has never been anyone else, he said simply. His voice broke on the words, raw and unguarded. There never will be. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the distant chirp of crickets. And then, finally, Jennifer let go. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as they reached for him. His arms closed around her instantly, pulling her against his chest. She sobbed into him, her body shaking, and he held her tighter, as if anchoring her to him could erase every doubt, every cruel whisper, every wound of the past. For the first time, Jennifer allowed herself to lean on him, to believe that maybe, just maybe, this love was real. The children sensed it before she even admitted it. They adored Jones. Michael followed him everywhere, wide-eyed at his stories of Canada and his bold laughter. Little Anna took to sitting on his lap, curling into his chest as if he'd always been there. They trusted him instinctively, and he cherished them with the same devotion he gave their mother. Jennifer saw it all, and it terrified her. Because if Jones ever walked away, it wouldn't just be her heart broken, it would be theirs too. And yet, when she watched him teach Michael how to throw a ball in the yard or listened to Anna's giggles as he spun her around, Jennifer's heart softened in ways she couldn't fight anymore. One evening, as the children slept, Jones sat with Jennifer on the porch. The moonlight bathed her face in silver, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. "What are you afraid of?" he asked softly. Her breath caught. She turned her gaze away. "Everything. That you'll change your mind. That you'll wake up one day and realize you deserve better. That people will mock us. That my children will love you only to watch you leave." Her voice cracked. "I'm afraid of being abandoned again, Jones, and I don't think I'd survive it a second time." He took her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "I can't promise the world won't whisper. I can't promise life will be easy. But I can promise you this. I will never leave you. Not for money, not for pride, not for anyone else. You're it for me, Jennifer. Always have been, always will be." Tears glistened in her eyes, but this time she didn't pull away. That night, for the first time, Jennifer allowed herself to believe in a future with him. Jennifer had always believed she was too old, too scarred by life's disappointments, too burdened by her responsibilities to ever let love back in. But Jones didn't see her as flawed. He saw strength. He saw beauty. He saw a woman who had given everything to her children and still had room in her heart for love. One afternoon, Jennifer found herself sitting in the garden, the children playing nearby, and Jones beside her. He handed her a cup of tea, his gaze lingering on her as if memorizing every detail. "You know," he said softly, "the more time I spend with you, the more I realize something." She looked at him cautiously. "What?" "That you've always been my home, Jennifer. No matter where I was, no matter the years, no matter the distance, my heart was waiting here." Her chest tightened. The honesty in his voice, the unwavering devotion, broke through the last of her doubts. She reached for his hand, letting it rest between hers. I think I've been afraid of believing that love like this exists," she whispered. Jones brushed her knuckles with his thumb, a tender smile playing on his lips. "Then believe it now. Let me show you. Let me love you. All of you and them." He gestured to Michael and Emily, who were laughing as they chased butterflies in the garden. Jennifer watched the children giggle, saw the way they adored him, and felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. In that moment, she let herself lean into him just a little. She allowed the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could be loved again, and this time, fully, without fear. A few evenings later, Jones invited Jennifer to the garden once more. This time it was quiet. The children were tucked in bed, and the golden light of dusk painted the world in soft amber hues. He knelt on one knee in front of her, not with grand gestures, not with the eyes of the crowd upon them, but in intimate, raw vulnerability. "Jennifer," he began, voice trembling with emotion, "I've waited my whole life to stand here, to tell you that I want all of you, your heart, your soul, your children. I don't just want your hand. I want to be part of your world, your family. I want to love you and them as one. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to her eyes, and she covered her mouth in shock. The children, sensing the gravity of the moment, peeked from the staircase. Michael's eyes were wide, Emily biting her lip in excitement. "Jones," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I don't know what to say. I never thought—" "You don't have to say anything. Just let me love you. That's all I've ever wanted." Jennifer looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy she had loved, the man who had returned with unwavering devotion, and the future he was offering her. Her walls crumbled completely. She nodded, a sob escaping her lips, and whispered, "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Jones rose, slipping the ring on her finger, and kissed her hand tenderly. Then, enveloped in the quiet glow of the evening, he held her close, sealing a promise years in the making. The wedding that followed was a mix of tears and joy. Society whispered, as expected, some calling the union improper, others astonished at the age gap, the single mother, the once abandoned woman now marrying the wealthy prodigal son. But none of it mattered. Jennifer walked down the aisle radiant in a simple, elegant gown that hugged her curves perfectly, her hair loosely pinned to frame her glowing face. Joan stood at the altar, eyes fixed solely on her, as if she were the only woman in the world. The children held hands at the front, beaming proudly at their mother and the man who had become their new anchor. Vows were exchanged, promises whispered through tears. And when Jones kissed her for the first time as his wife, it wasn't just a kiss. It was the culmination of years of longing, patience, heartbreak, and relentless love. The applause of friends and family faded into background noise. For Jones and Jennifer, the moment was theirs alone. Life after the wedding was filled with joy in its purest form. Jones showered Jennifer with affection in small and grand ways alike. Every morning he reminded her that she was loved through breakfast in bed, soft kisses on her forehead, whispered compliments on the way her laughter could light up a room. He adored her children with equal devotion. He was there for school projects, bedtime stories, scraped knees, and triumphs alike. Slowly, Jennifer realized that love isn't measured in years, nor in wealth, nor in society's judgment. It is measured in the depth of devotion, the consistency of presence, and the courage to stay when it matters most. Evenings were filled with quiet moments, walking the garden hand in hand, laughter bouncing off the walls of their home. Weekends were spent exploring the world together, creating memories as a family that would endure far beyond the fleeting opinions of others. Jennifer, once afraid of love, now understood its power. She understood that age and past heartbreak could never diminish what was true. She looked at Jones one night as he held her in his arms beneath the stars and whispered, "I never imagined I could feel this safe, this loved, this whole." Jones kissed the top of her head, brushing her hair away from her face. "You've always deserved this, Jennifer. I've loved you as a boy, fought for you as a man, and now for the rest of our lives I will cherish you as my wife." The children, giggling nearby, were the perfect echo of the life they had built together, full of laughter, warmth, and love. Jennifer rested her head against Jones's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, knowing she would never be abandoned again. The whispers of society faded in comparison to the symphony of love in their home. Every wrinkle, every scar, every trial of the past became irrelevant.
They had built a life together not defined by years, by mistakes, or by gossip, but by a devotion that had survived distance, heartbreak, and time itself. And in the quiet moments when the world was still, Jennifer would smile up at him, and Jones would smile back, knowing that the love they shared was stronger than anything the world could throw at them. They had finally come home to each other, to a family, to a forever that was theirs alone. He had loved her as a boy, fought for her as a man, and now for the rest of their lives he would cherish her as his wife. And that's the end of today's story. A love that waited, endured, and finally found its home. I hope this story touched your heart as much as it touched mine. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until then, take care of your hearts. Keep believing in love. It always finds its